I'm Steve Vinson, and you are about to experience the life science effect. Now it's time to go behind the scenes once again to talk to another leader who's out there making it happen. And welcome to the show. Today we have Marian Mutch. Marian, why don't you go ahead and tell everybody who you are and what you do for a living?
Absolutely, Steve. Thank you. So my name is Marian Mutch, and I'm currently the Director of Project Management for India. My responsibilities, currently I'm on assignment in Bangalore in India, as the company I'm working for is setting up a new location where we're providing some back office support with approximately 350 resources in India to support our global project management team. Mm-hmm. So I've been in India for 6 months, part the way through my assignment. And it's a huge learning opportunity from a personal and also professional perspective.
Great. And is this your first time in India?
It is actually, yes. I'd never been to India before. I had a conversation with our global vice president about the opportunity to go live and work in India. So I was there at the beginning of this year, was there for 2 days and had to make a quick decision whether I could commit to living and working there for a year. And I made a decision very quickly. From a professional perspective, I would learn a lot. It's a brand new area for me personally. A big commitment because of the family still staying in the US, but my husband and my kids have been very supportive and allowed me to take this opportunity on.
They get a lot of help from their coworkers. He gets a lot of help from his coworkers.
Absolutely, he does.
Full disclosure for our listeners, I actually work with Marian's husband. He calls himself a project manager, so now you're a director of project management. Right. You can brag about that.
Absolutely.
At home, right? And it has been interesting watching him take over all the duties while you're away.
Absolutely, while I'm away. Yeah.
I know he misses you a lot, but I know Covance is lucky to have you over there. So you've been doing this for 6 months. You've had quite a long and successful career. So how did you start out in life science in the first place?
Yeah, so when I finished school, as I looked at the qualifications that I had, I was looking at university options. And because of the subjects I'd chosen in school, science seemed to be the most natural thing for me to do. So I went into university to do analytical chemistry. And as a result of doing that, I wanted to spend my time during the summer months doing something useful. And I actually knew somebody that worked, it was for SmithKline Beecham at the time. So this was an operator that worked in the manufacturing plant on the west coast of Scotland. So through my connection with him, he put me in touch with somebody in HR. And I said, hey, I'm looking for some work in the summer months. I'm going to be out of college for 3-4 months. Do you have anything? Fortunately enough, they did. So I had the chance to work in a lab. It was a raw materials lab. So we were testing the raw materials that were going into the finished product. And I did that for a few years to kind of help supplement my funds when I was at college. And when I finished my degree, I was then looking to see what my next opportunity was. And I decided to go back to college to do a master's. And again, it was in analytical chemistry. And I was able to do my project with them. And as a result of the degree that I'd chosen, the fact that I'd worked for SmithKline Beecham, is now part of the GSK chain, and worked for them in the summer and was able to get my master's project with them. That's kind of how I fell into the life sciences industry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I tell people life science kind of chose me.
Yeah, absolutely.
and then I kind of fell in love with it, so I stuck with it.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah.
Sounds similar. So most of our listeners right now, as of 2018, are in the Midwest. They're obviously going to recognize an accent. Why don't you tell us where you're originally from?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'm originally, was born in Scotland, had a very interesting upbringing. I was only in Scotland for about 8 months, and then my family moved to Germany. So I actually had my primary school and my secondary school education in Germany because my father was in the British forces there. So when my father had retired from the army, we then moved to Scotland, and that's where I went to university. So I did my degree and also my master's with the same university on the east coast of Scotland, up in Aberdeen. And then when I had done my master's project with SmithKline Beecham, I actually was able to get a full-time role with that organization. And at the same time, I'd also had an interest in forensic sciences. So I'd got a place at Strathclyde University in Glasgow to go and do a master's in forensic sciences. So after I'd worked for SmithKline Beecham for nearly 2 years, I made the decision to go back to full-time education because I'd always had a desire to learn about, forensics and kind of who did it, who done it, and kind of investigative.
Kind of like CSI.
Absolutely, yeah. I was kind of fascinated by all this kind
the
of
dramatic lighting, and it's mostly dark in the lab, right?
Absolutely.
With just light shining. And...
Absolutely, from a different color light, you can tell who done it, right?
That's right.
So,
and the computers all make funny noises for
Right.
some reason. Okay,
Yeah,
I get
absolutely.
it. Now I got a mental image now.
Yeah, so then I kind of went to university, did a master's in forensic sciences, but in the UK, the majority of the forensic labs are owned by the police force and the government services. So it's a very difficult industry to get into. I didn't have any experience, but I had a master's. And so I was either too qualified because they were looking for people at entry level, or I had the qualification, but I didn't have the experience. So then I ended up going back to the healthcare industry, to the life sciences industry, because I'd had the experience working in the labs previously. So I made the decision to continue down that path.
So as a leader in pharmaceutical development, I guess would be the general term, right? As in a clinical laboratory setting and in clinical trial setting, right? I happen to know you've had experience in China.
Yes.
And now in India.
Right.
Here in the Midwest.
Yep.
Probably other places I just haven't found out about yet. Can you think of any cultural differences, especially maybe with India or China, between leading a group of people there versus leading a group of people here?
Absolutely. And I'd spent 4 years living and working in China. And then from there, I came to the Midwest. And I naively thought it would be an easier transition moving as a British person to the US, right? Because we all speak English. But I very quickly found out that British English is different to American English. And
well, you speak English. We speak some version of
exactly,
some
right.
other language.
But personally, because I'd spent the 4 years in China, and it is completely different. You don't recognize the language when it's in its written form. You cannot guess what a word is because of what somebody's saying. Unlike a lot of the European languages, you can maybe pick out nuances or kind of, and there may be a word that's familiar because we share the language, if you like.
Yeah. In a lot of cases, they'll share the same root if they're both, say, Romantic or Germanic languages. Right. But it seems like a lot of the words, since our cultures are sort of intermeshed.
Absolutely.
And have been for the last 1,000 or 1,500 years.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think a survival tip, I think for me personally, I mentioned that I lived in Germany for many years. My mother is actually Malaysian Chinese. So I think as a young child living in Germany, where my father's side of the family were in Scotland, my mother's side of the family were in Malaysia, we used to travel as a family. So I had a better appreciation for different cultures and really took the opportunity as I was embarking upon a career in China and then now in Bangalore in India, was just to observe, don't come in with, this is the way I've always done it, so this is the way I'm going to have to continue to do it, right? Because as a leader, you do have to adapt to your environment. You do have to get the signals from the people you're interacting with. And just kind of looking, listening, and being in observing mode before you come in and expect what you've done before is absolutely going to work no matter where you are in the organization.
Do you think it's almost I think I know what my answer would be to this, but I've never led in China or India. But do you think that they were standing around looking at you thinking, why is she only listening? Isn't she supposed to come and tell us what to do? Or do you think they more respected the fact that you were listening and observing?
That's a good question. I think I would agree with you that there is an expectation in a lot of Asian countries that, as a senior individual, you come in, you tell people what to do, and then people will just follow an instruction. But in China in particular, it was a very young generation of people that I was working with. So they had a thirst and a desire to learn from people with more experience, from people from other parts of the world as well. So they would ask questions and they would also share their ideas and their suggestions. India's very similar in that very aggressive workforce that's looking for advancement, that's looking for promotion. And if they can tap into a resource to help them learn and grow personally,
Yeah.
then absolutely they would take the time to kind of listen.
Any examples of either China, India, the U.S., Britain, where maybe you listened and observed and somebody made a decision that maybe you would not have agreed with, but either maybe you let them go, and how did it turn out? So is there a time when you thought, okay, this is not the culture I'm used to, I'm going to see how this plays out, when maybe you really wanted to tell them, no, don't do it that way? Any examples like that?
Gosh, the situation that I found myself in China was very interesting in that it was a brand new facility that I was helping to get set up. I was working in a quality assurance role, so I needed to get the QA auditors in place. I also needed to make sure that the procedures were in place and that we had the appropriate regulatory inspections that were needed as a brand new facility. So being completely new in China and being in a part of the world that the company had never been in before meant that we had to utilize external consultants and resources to help us get through the regulatory requirements that were needed to be successful in China. So that part of that process for me was understanding from the consultants, where is the legislation, right? I was in QA and I had to help the organization make sure we're following regulations. So I wanted to understand, where were the regulations? What did they say? And, what advice they would give in helping a multinational like ourselves be successful in obtaining the appropriate certification. And the initial conversations I was having with these consultants was, yes, you've got the regulations here, but there's also the things that are not written down that are expected from facilities in China that you need to be aware of. And again, coming from a different part of the world where, you have the regulations written down, yes, there's sometimes some gray area and some interpretation, but there's always some supporting guidance documents like the FDA would publish, right? To help industry understand the interpretation. That didn't exist in China.
Oh, wow.
So really had to connect with the right consultants that were considered the experts in their field to help a multinational, get set up and be successful as part of that accreditation process.
Sorry, were these Chinese consultants?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. I had not thought of the idea that there might be consultants in China. But I just thought maybe the government would come and tell you what to do. But
so the consultants actually work for the government.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But they are considered experts in their field, and you have connections with people in government that can help you get set up and, be there to consult with.
That is so different because, as you say, in the U.S., what I've seen is the regulations are there or the guidance documents are there.
Right.
But it's always, as long as you're following what the guidance or the regulation says, you're going to be fine, probably.
Right.
There's never going to be a regulator that says, yeah, I know it's not written that way, but we like it this way.
Right. Well, this
Maybe
is what
at
we've
one
seen.
time.
Yeah, this is what we've seen in other locations, so we
yeah.
expect you to do it. Right.
Right,
And
right.
it's that kind of information that's not written down that as a newbie coming into a different country, how do you know what you need to do?
I think it might have been that way, say, 20 years ago in medical device in the U.S. Before the medical device, the quality system regulation was really written and interpreted, and then some experience in the field. Because I do remember a lot of weird things that people would say, well, you have to do it this way because that's what the FDA wants. And then you could go look at the quality system regulation and say, well, it doesn't say that here. And they say, yeah, but I know when I worked at this other company, this is what happened. So it's almost like we've evolved sort of away from that, and maybe China's.
Yeah, you need to remember that in China, the GLPs, so the good laboratory practices, they're still relatively new. So from an FDA perspective, I think it was 1978, 1979 when they were first published. China was another 20, 25 years after that. And they actually took the FDA GLPs and kind of made it into their own, but they didn't provide the supporting guidance documents that the FDA has as part of the interpretation or application of the GLPs.
Interesting.
Yep.
Very interesting. So let's talk about your personal leadership experience. What was there a story you're particularly proud of, a project you worked on or something you accomplished, and how did your leadership play a role in that?
Right. I would go back to my experience in China. So it was a startup. So we were generating a preclinical facility there. And in China, in order to be able to do GLP work, you have to go through this accreditation process. So you have to have established the systems and the procedures to follow GLP, and you have to demonstrate that for at least a year. And then you invite the CFDA or the Chinese FDA to come to your facility and then make sure that you have all the GLP principles in place, and then you get certified. Only when you're certified can you then claim compliance to the CFDA GLPs. So Covance and my involvement with the Covance organization was we were the very first multinational CRO in China to be able to get the CFDA GLP certification.
Wow.
Some of our competitors had tried and had failed. But we were the first, and that was back in 2011. So 7 years on, we're still part of their accreditation program, and we still get certified every 3 years as part of their ongoing GLP certification.
That's fantastic. A very significant accomplishment.
Right.
How did your leadership, and what would you say you brought to in terms of a leader to help make that happen?
Right. So I talked about the fact that, I didn't have experience in China. We had to use consultants to understand what we needed to do. So the skills that I brought to the table was providing the structure and the rigor and the management around such an undertaking, right? So there were specific things that we had to have in place. So made sure that we captured where the gaps were, the activities that we needed to do, and made sure we had owners and due dates against all those items that we needed to have in place. Because, if we didn't mitigate the gaps, if we didn't put in place the requirements that were needed to get through the inspection as part of the certification process, we would have failed. So it was that structure, the rigor, and the documentation to support what was needed, and the visibility to our executive management that, things were on track, or otherwise if we needed to kind of adjust based on, things that we were uncovering as part of that project.
Great. And what about something maybe you would rather forget, maybe a mistake or not necessarily a mistake, but something didn't go as well as you had hoped? And how did leadership play a role in maybe pulling you out of that? And what did you learn from it?
I had the opportunity, so I've worked with Covance for nearly 19 years, and I had the opportunity to move into a process excellence role. So this was about 10 years into my tenure with the organization. All the time I'd worked for the company, I was either in a quality assurance role or I was in a compliance and regulatory type role. And I wanted to expand my toolkit, right? From a professional perspective, I wanted to be known for something different. I wanted to have other opportunities open up to me and not just stay within kind of quality. So I took the opportunity to move into a process excellence role. And it was at a time when it was actually within the IT organization. So this was reporting directly into the CIO. And the personal goal that I had was to be able to get some certification, whether it was a black belt or a master black belt, learn a lot personally and gain some methodologies and skills and tools that I could use, outside of a process excellence role. The intention was to support the IT organization to help standardize some of their processes. And then I was in that role for only 9 months, had made some great strides, hadn't yet started on a black belt certification. But then I got a phone call to say, how would you like to come to the QA organization, but create the team in China?
Yeah.
So it was a big decision for me because I was trying to break out of that quality mold. But the opportunity to live and work in a different country as part of a startup was too big a draw for me. So for all the reasons that I'd left QA to do the process excellence role, I never was able to finish off any certification that I'd started, and kind of QA drew me back. But the chance to live and work abroad was too big a draw for me to turn down.
Well, I think you might have gotten out of IT just in time. I do realize this is being recorded, so I probably don't want to get too much into it.
Yeah.
So I'm doing the math in my head. Let's see. 2011, you established the GLP certification.
Yep.
So you must have been in China, I think, up until a couple of years ago, right?
Yeah. So I left in 2014.
Okay. So you would have left IT about 2010.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
We could talk more about that off the air. I think I joined the IT organization at Covance around 2010.
Okay.
And left in 2015. But we could talk all
I'm sure
about that one day and then bury the recording somewhere. Fantastic. Well, thanks for sharing the something that's not, one of the things I talk to people about when I talk about this show and like what should we do and what's missing in terms of like when we go out networking and those kinds of things, and maybe other shows similar to this, although I haven't found any. But one of the things that as a culture at least in the US, maybe around the world, we're not always comfortable sharing the things we're less proud of.
Yep.
But sometimes I think that's where you can learn the most.
Absolutely.
And I talk to entrepreneurs and leaders of startups, and they know all about failure and coming up short and all that stuff. And they say, hey, if we never tried something and risked something and failed, we'd never learn anything. We'd never get anywhere. So I appreciate you sharing that one. I think maybe you could get back to getting your black belt here pretty soon, right?
Absolutely.
As a project management director, that would be perfect. Although I think maybe you would be more in a position to lead black belts at this point.
I hope so. Maybe one day.
Okay, well, we're going to take a short break, and when we come back, I just have a few more questions, maybe more on a personal level.
Okay.
We are very proud to have the support of the Indiana Health Industry Forum here at the Life Science Effect. They have been with us since day one. IHIF provides guidance and leadership on public policy issues that contribute to innovation in the health science sector, deliver therapies to patients in need, and further the development and growth of their member companies. IHIF also works with the government and other groups to support specific initiatives and legislation. Also, if you need a connection in the health industry, give them a call. Go to ihif.org and they will hook you up. They have been a tremendous supporter of ours, so thanks again to the Indiana Health Industry Forum. Go check out ihif.org and support them like they support our life science community. Now, back to the show.
Welcome back. So how about we start with, obviously in Bangalore now, you're building out a team. Throughout your career, I'm sure you've had experience building teams and giving feedback to teams and developing teams and developing people. What are your sort of values and principles that you look for in people and that you try to inspire in other people?
Absolutely. So when in being involved in a startup and working with people that are new to the company, for me, it's about making a connection with them so they truly understand what we're doing. We're not in the industry where we're making widgets, right? There's a lot of empowerment that we need our employees to have. There's a lot of taking the initiative, asking clarifying questions. So what I do is if there is an issue or a situation that I've found that the team has been involved in that's had a negative impact, is turning that around into an experience and a story on what are the consequences of the mistake that's been made. So it's not accusing people of doing a bad job, but it's really helping them grow and learn from that experience, but not just them as an individual, but their peers as well. Because I think it's very easy, to have that one-on-one conversation and have some feedback, but sometimes it's more appropriate to share amongst a bigger audience so that others can learn from somebody else's mistakes. So I'm learning a lot of that in the startup in Bangalore. The team that I manage is about 210 people. 210 people in the last kind of 7 months. And so there's a lot that they are learning about the expectations of the company, the expectations of our clients, but then also the expectations of their peers in different parts of the world. So it really is about trying to connect with them, connect their role that they do on a day-to-day basis to the much, much bigger picture and the impact that we have on patients' lives that are, signed up on clinical trials.
So connecting with a bigger
Absolutely.
Cause.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
Great. So when you look at, I've actually had a chance to talk with you. Is Ted your boss?
He was.
So he was. He's not currently. Okay. I had a chance to talk to him before I ever had a podcast. I was just curious. Had a chance to talk to him about his leadership style. and he talked about, what I had always learned in leadership classes was, if people have a strength, cool, let them use that strength, but look for places where they need work and help them work on the things that they need to work on. And he kind of turned that upside down. He said, people's, don't really want to call them weaknesses. It's just where they're not as strong. Maybe He's like, that's cool. They could work on that, but I want to find what they're really good at and exploit that and
absolutely motivate them,
them to like pursue what they're
right.
So how do you view that similarly, or do you more say, okay, here's an area where you're weak, we need to work on that, at the same time that we take advantage of your strengths? Or would you more say, let's not worry about your weaknesses, that's a weakness, let's concentrate on your strength?
For me personally, it's about the balance, right? Absolutely. As a leader, I would like to have the constructive feedback. I'd like to understand where I have development opportunities, but then I also want to feel that I'm giving something back, that I am adding value to the organization. And I would hope that I can use my strengths, and that, my peers and the leaders in the company value me for my strengths. And so that I have the opportunity to kind of continue to practice those and, hone those skills. So it is about a balance for me personally. Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay. So here's the $1,000 question. So you're busy. I know you're busy because I work with your husband and we get to talk.
Right.
And I know I know that when you're in India, you're busy. And I know when you come home, you're still working. You're working India hours and U.S. hours.
Right.
And I know you have young children, very involved children who like to do a lot of different things.
Right.
And I know you want to be a part of that. I'm sure you have some other social things you like to do. How do you balance it all? And maybe you don't even know, but as busy as you are, how do you find the time to keep it all balanced and continue to move forward?
I'm not sure that it is completely balanced, to be honest. When I'm not in the US, I'm working in Bangalore on my assignment. I do maybe a 10-hour day in the office, and then I'll go back to my accommodation and I'll maybe do another few hours, because that's when I'm connecting with my US colleagues, right? Because they're online at that point in the day. I do try and make sure that I talk to the family at least twice a day.
Wow.
Even with a time difference. So catch them on their way to school, and then I catch them before they go to bed at night. I think some of the other things that I try to do is recognize that I can't be that superwoman, right? I can't have it all. I can't do everything and satisfy everybody 100% all of the time. Because if I thought that, then I'm kidding myself, right? And I'll be letting myself and others down. So it's all about the compromise, but it's also about the acknowledgement that there are things that absolutely have to get done today, but there are things that can wait. And don't kill yourself trying to get it done, because it can wait. And acknowledge that. And
how do you stay healthy while you're traveling back and forth and working so much?
Yeah. So, the accommodation I'm staying at, they have a nice swimming pool. They have a gym that's open 24/7. And unfortunately, my trainers are still sitting in my suitcase and I haven't been able to take them out. Yeah. So I agree that I'm probably compromising on being able to have a little bit of me time. Especially during the week. But at the weekends, I try to get out, do some walking. I take advantage of the fact that I'm in Bangalore and I do some traveling as well. So that's kind of where I have some time for myself. Yeah, good. Because it seems like time is finite, right? But we can all use more of the time in the day. But energy can be super finite as well. Yeah. But it seems like you can flex that more if you can find the time to go for a walk, get some fresh air. Absolutely. And I think prioritizing family, talking to them twice a day. I know for me, when I've traveled in the past, I haven't been good at that. I've always thought incorrectly, I think now that I think about it, incorrectly that, my family they know I'm doing this for the good of the family, either to advance my career and it'll make us more money or whatever. They'll understand. It's like the first thing to fall off. It's almost like if you borrow money from your, from your parents or something, they're the last ones you pay back. Right. But I love that you prioritize it and say, nope, I'm talking to them twice a day.
in the morning. And after,
Yep.
I can't be there physically, but I
Right.
can be there on the phone with them. I
Yeah.
love that you're doing that.
Absolutely. And even if I can't talk to them, I'll send a text message to them or something, right? So
Yeah.
they know that I'm thinking of them, and
Oh, yeah.
you know, even though we're thousands of miles away. So technology has helped immensely in being able to do that.
Fantastic. So how much longer do you have on this assignment?
I'm probably half the way through, so I've got another kind of 6 months to go, probably.
Selfishly, I'm looking forward to you being finished so we can have more dinner parties.
Absolutely.
and
Yes.
Try some more of your
absolutely.
curry. I love your curry.
Yes.
So,
Yep.
yeah, fantastic. Well, thanks for being on the show.
Thank
Is
you.
there anything you didn't get to tell me because I didn't ask the right question?
For me, I would just advise people take a risk, right? In my personal situation, I've been with a company for as many years as I have. I never thought I would still be with the same company. I've been able to kind of step outside my comfort zone, move into an IT role. I had no IT qualifications, move halfway around the world to get involved in a startup in China.
Yeah.
From there, I ended up in the Midwest. From there, I was talking to some leaders about my personal growth, and the opportunity in Bangalore came up. So take a risk, take yourself outside your comfort zone. You'll be amazed what opportunities will actually open up.
Great advice. Great advice. Good place to end on. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to The Life Science Effect. Don't miss an episode. Be sure and like, subscribe, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. That really, really helps. And go on over to thelifescienceeffect.com to find all the ways to listen and how to get a hold of me, and tell me who you think should be on the show. Now, what effect will you cause?